Good evening. My name is Melissa Williams, and I serve as the president of the Washington County Board of Education. I would like to welcome the members of the Board of Education, the superintendent, staff, and the community to the Board of Education's public business meeting. Everyone is participating in this meeting using a telephone or an electronic device. By way of background, it has always been the practice of the Washington County Board of Education to meet in person and to invite members of the public to the board's meetings. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, certain legal directives, and the need to safeguard the health of our community, it is necessary to participate in this public meeting by phone or an electronic device. Today's business meeting will be recorded, and the public may access the public meeting now on channel 99.
Arcade is now joining.
Facebook, and on WCPS's website at wcpsmd.com/school-board/board-meetings. The public comment portion of the meeting will not take place this evening. The Board of Education encourages the public to submit their comments in writing to boe@wcps.k12.md.us. This information will then be distributed to board members and the superintendent. At this time, I call to order the public business meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. Dr. Bishop, would you please call the roll for attendance?
Mr. Bickford,
Here.
Mrs. Fisher,
Here.
Mr. Gaspard,
Present.
Mrs. Murray,
Here.
Mr. Ridenhour, Mr. Stauffer,
Here.
Mrs. Williams,
Here.
Mr. Mackley,
Here.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. We have 6 members and our student representative present, so I declare that we do have a quorum. This evening, we're happy to have, through the wonders of technology, our Pledge of Allegiance delivered by Marcello Anderson, a 5th grade student at Rockland Woods Elementary School.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Marcello. At this time, we'll have approval of this evening's agenda. Is there a motion?
This is Peter. I move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
This is Linda. I
Second.
second.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray, for the second. The motion is on approval of tonight's agenda. Dr. Bishop, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Fisher,
Here. Aye.
Mr. Gaspard,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
and Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
I have 6 affirmative votes and the student member concurs, so we have approval of tonight's agenda. We'll move on to approval of the minutes.
Mrs. Williams, I move for the approval of the closed session minutes dated Tuesday, April 7th, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Is there a second?
Mrs. Fisher seconds.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Do we have any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none. Dr. Bishop, would you call the roll for the vote, please?
Mr. Gesford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher.
Aye.
Okay, we have 6 affirmative votes and our minutes of the closed session are approved.
Mrs. Williams, I move for the approval of the business meeting minutes dated Tuesday, April 7th, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Is there a second?
I
Second,
second
Mr.
Mrs.
Stauffer.
Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Stauffer, for the second. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none. Dr. Bishop, will you call the roll for the vote, please?
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Gesford,
Aye.
and Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
I have 6 affirmative votes with the student representative concurring, so we have approval of the business meeting minutes. Thank you. As mentioned previously, there is no public comment for this evening's meeting. However, the Board of Education encourages the public to submit their comments in writing to the board's email, boe@wcps.k12.md.us. Moving to old business, we have one item under consideration, and that is the second reading of proposed policy ACA, educational equity.
Thank you. Good evening. This is Mr. Trotta. By way of background, every local board of education in Maryland is required to adopt an educational equity policy. The policy committee conducted a number of public work sessions to develop an educational equity policy. On March the 3rd, 2020, the Board of Education approved the first reading of this new proposed policy during its public business meeting. The community has been provided with an opportunity to offer comments, and the Board of Education has considered each of those comments. The most recent comment concerned the capacity of a certain software program, and that comment has been referred to the Technology Department for action. The Policy Committee is requesting the Board of Education's approval of the second reading of Policy ACA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion?
Yes, Madam President, Mrs. Fisher. I move to approve the second reading of proposed policy ACA entitled Educational Equity.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second, Gesford.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Do we have any questions for Mr. Trotta or any discussion?
Yes, Mrs. Fisher. ACA is a very detailed policy that will affect virtually every aspect of public education, including facilities, curriculum, hiring practices, assessments, professional development, evaluations, instructional materials, etc., in an effort to provide whatever each student needs to be successful. I cannot recall any single policy in my 15 years of board service, most of which included membership or chairmanship of the policy committee, This is one that we have worked on for actually a couple of months, trying to perfect it as best we can. And I hope that it passes on second read. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Anyone else? Okay, if there's no further discussion or any questions, Dr. Bishop, would you call the roll for the vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Guestford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
and Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. I have 6 affirmative votes with the student member concurring. The second reading of proposed policy ACA, educational equity, passes. We'll move on now to new business. Our first item of consideration under new business this evening is the first reading of proposed changes to policy GBA, diversity.
Thank you.
Mr.
This is
Trotta.
Mr. Trotta. The Policy Committee undertook a review of policy GBA, which concerns diversity, at its public work sessions on February 27th and March the 10th of 2020. The review of this policy was in concert with the Policy Committee's work on the educational equity policy. The Policy Committee is offering minor changes to this current policy. The committee is requesting the Board of Education's approval of the first reading of the proposed changes to this policy. If the Board of Education approves the first reading, this document will be posted on Board Docs to offer a community the opportunity to offer comments on the proposed changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion?
Madam President, Mrs. Fisher moves to approve the first reading of proposed changes to policy GBA, which is entitled Diversity.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Mrs.
Murray,
seconds.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray, for the second. Do we have any questions for Mr. Trotta or any discussion? Hearing none. Dr. Bishop, would you please call the roll for the vote?
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Guestford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
and Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. I have 6 affirmative votes with the student member concurring. So the first reading of proposed changes to policy GBA passes. Thank you, Mr. Trotta.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll move to tonight's consent agenda. Mr. Bakedel, Supervisor of Purchasing.
Good evening, President Williams, member of the board, and Dr. Michael. Tonight, I have 4 items for your review. The Purchasing Review Committee has reviewed these items and they are being recommended for approval. And staff is available if you have any additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bakedel. Is there a motion?
Madam President, this is Mr. Bickford. I move to approve the awards, renewals, and procurements for school-wide area network services to select WCPS locations to Antietam Broadband at a 5-year total cost of $2,131,020. Classroom literature sets for read aloud and shared reading to Scholastic at a cost of $453,180. Materials of instruction for pre-K to Lakeshore Learning Materials at a total cost of $102,641.79. And mathematics instructional resources to Learn Zillion Inc. at a cost of $88,056.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Do we have a second?
Guestford seconds it.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Do we have any questions for Mr. Bakedal or any discussion? Hearing none. Dr. Bishop, would you please call for the vote? Or call the roll for the vote, please?
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Gaspard,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. I have 6 affirmative votes with the student rep concurring, and we have approval of this evening's consent agenda. Thank you, Mr. Bakedal.
Thank you.
Next, under new business, is the superintendent's report. Dr. Michael.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams, and thank you, members of the board. Tonight, as we have done many times, we're going to recognize some of our student athletes from winter sports, from wrestling, indoor track, and bocce that have either won individual awards or team awards. And I'd like to call on Mr. Eric Michael at this time to recognize those students. It's going to be a little bit different tonight that we can't be there in person, but I do believe we have some pictures of the students, and we're going to try that out tonight and see how that goes. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Michael.
Good evening. Tonight, we're going to recognize several individuals and 2 teams on winning state championships this winter season in their respective sports. We're going to start this evening with our wrestling champions. This year, the Maryland Public Secondary School Athletic Association, which is known as MPSSAA, hosted an inaugural girls state championship tournament, girls only tournament, along with their traditional co-ed state championship tournament. We're pleased that Jennifer Hood was the 1A, 2A, 172-pound champion from Smithsburg High School. So she is our first girls champion from this tournament. So congratulations to Jennifer. Thomas Mon of North Hagerstown High School won his first state championship in the 3A, 4A, 132-pound weight class. And Brandon Oyster of Williamsport High School won the 1A, 2A, 220-pound weight class. This was also Brandon's first state championship. And I should mention that Brandon finished the season undefeated with over 50 wins this year. So congratulations to our wrestling champions.
If I can interrupt, are we supposed to be seeing photos?
No, I'm looking at Channel 99. The photos are actually coming up, and they look great. I guess we're just blanked out here on the screen that you're seeing.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, our indoor track athletes had a very successful 4 years, very successful year with 4 champions. Those champions are Zane Iggy Chalker of Williamsport High School. Iggy won the boys 3,200 meter run with a time of 9 minutes, 52 seconds. Daly Yunker of Smithsburg High School won the girls 1A 3,200 meter run with a time of 12 minutes, 47 seconds. And those names may be familiar. Both Iggy and Daly won the cross-country championships in the fall. Also from Smithsburg High School, we have Cameron Rejonis, who won the boys 1A 800 meter run with a time of 2 minutes, 7 seconds. And then from South Hagerstown High School, Charlie Hostin won the boys 3A high jump with a winning leap of 6 feet, 8 inches. Congratulations to our indoor track champions. Our team champions this year competed in the Unified Bocce State Tournament, which took place at Hagerstown Community College. And if you remember the unified sports, they divide the teams in divisions based off ability level. This year, Boonesboro Team 1 won the Division IV state championship. Team members are Faith Garachi, Noah Goligly, Andrew Big Time Hines, Anika Medola, Carly Schofield, Garrett Single, Brady Weaver, and the team is coached by Dan Ricketts and Andrea Perry. So congratulations, Boonesboro Team 1. And then Clear Spring Team 2 is the Division III state champions for Unified Bocce. Their team members are Abigail Angles, Jaylee Blickenstaff, Haley Burkholder, Anna Crow, Austin Doppel, Ariana Harmon, Olivia Kuntz, Maggie Possinger, and Ty Shekels. The team is coached by Matt Kimman and Chris Malott. I'd like to say congratulations to all of our student athletes and coaches on a great winter season for Washington County. And again, congratulate our state champions on their stellar seasons. I can't wait to see all of our student athletes back out on the fields and courts real soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Appreciate that. And congratulations to our athletes. We're so proud of them and the work that they've done. We do regret that we weren't able to meet them in person tonight and congratulate them personally, but all the more, we just congratulate them for a very successful winter sports season. At this time, I'd like to move into some of my other comments. I guess the very first thing I want to do, I want to thank staff. We are in a very interesting, challenging time as staff has made tremendous adjustments to go from teaching in a classroom 1 week and only a couple weeks later with very little training and very little notice has done just an outstanding job, in my opinion, to flip into a completely new technology mode, a completely different mode in teaching children. I just can't thank them enough for exploring things, working on the technology, pulling their lessons together, jumping in to this distant learning environment and doing the very best they can to help meet the needs of our students. I just very much appreciate how hard you're working and your dedication to our students. I know what makes this difficult is that you care so much about your students, that you want them to do well, and you're always striving to do more. And that just makes this all the more challenging in this type of environment for right now. So thank you, staff. Again, I appreciate your efforts beyond what I can express tonight. Also, I want to thank our students. I mean, they too, one day we're expecting to be in class, maybe seated in chairs and rows, but also a whole variety of seating and techniques that we have that we use now. But they're suddenly thrust on the other end of the computer or Google Sheets or Docs, a variety of learning packets and things. And I just appreciate them showing up every day and working hard to keep up with their learning. Again, just in a completely different setup than what they're used to. Just encourage them to be resilient, to continue to adjust as we continue to adjust to meet your needs. Be patient with mom and dad who are trying to help you out, or your brothers and sisters. And I know everyone's fighting for internet time. Just try to work that out there together. But I do appreciate our students. And I also want to say thank you to our families. Our families suddenly, they have always been the primary teacher of their child, but I know I've got many, many emails from parents that are saying, hey, this is not what I signed up for. We pay teachers to do this job. And I would just have to say to everybody, we just need to be patient with each other, work with each other. Our staff definitely wants to do their part. And just encourage parents just to make sure you're doing all you can to help your child join the Zoom sessions, join the Google information we're sharing, complete the work, make sure you submit that. For any reason you can't join us actively online, you certainly go to one of our schools. We have large signs that are out that say Wi-Fi hotspot. It's an open network for you to come and download materials and upload student work. We also have learning packets available for students that just don't have a means to get onto the internet, and principals have shared a variety of ways that students can access that information and turn it in. So parents, I would just say try to be positive with your child, try to set a set schedule, Again, I know you're competing for technology and internet time and things like that if you're working from home as well. Again, we just thank you for your efforts, and we just need to kind of work through this together. All of us want to see the very best for our children. I'd like to share next just some concerns I have for our graduates. I know what a disappointing spring it's been so far. Many of you have not had the opportunity to participate in sports, plays, theater activities, band concerts, choral concerts, just seeing your friends every day, whole variety of clubs and things. And this isn't the spring that you anticipated as seniors having right now, especially with social distancing and maybe not even be able to see your friends in the evening or anytime. So we're aware of that. We're concerned about our seniors. Mr. Mackley, obviously, you represent our students, and I just want you to share any forum that you can. We're absolutely concerned about all students, but particularly our seniors and our graduates. We want what's very best for you. Right now, we're holding out hope that there will be a graduation ceremony of some type, but I must admit, I think it's going to be a slim hope that there's going to be any potential of us gathering in large crowds like we traditionally have with our celebrations of graduation. So we're currently kind of doing a dual track. We're investing in an online graduation platform. All of our speakers will be seen. Each child will be specially recognized. It obviously won't be the same as being there in person, but in the event that we can't have some type of live graduation ceremony, we're going to make this as special as we possibly can for our graduates. We're trying to spare no expense in a reasonable way to make this very special, and we'll continue to pursue that. As we get additional information, we'll be sharing that publicly in a variety of forums. Dr. Akers, our Executive Director of Secondary, is working closely with all of our principals, along with Aaron Anderson, our Public Information Officer, again, to make this a very special occasion, as well as a lot of our other celebrations that we've already missed: Celebration of Excellence, CTE Awards, Student Service Learning Awards, even our 5th grade Citizenship Awards. We've lost the opportunity to do those live at this point, but we're looking for ways to try to promote the success of all of our students in some manner. Probably one of the hottest topics right now is the last day of school. As everyone knows, we missed 10 days initially when the governor closes from March 16th to March 27th. Dr. Sam and the State Board did make it possible for boards to apply for a 5-day waiver. The board is in favor of seeking that waiver. We sent a letter to Dr. Salmon, the state superintendent. She has waived 5 days of the 10 days that were missed. In addition to that 5-day waiver, through adjustments of the calendar, again, that the board did at their last board meeting, students attended school on April 9th, which was originally a professional learning day, Good Friday, Easter Monday, and will attend school on April 28th, the original primary election day. So between the 5 days of waiver and the 4 days of those makeup days, we only need to make up one, the equivalent of like a snow day. So right now, the last day for students will be June 10th, Wednesday, June 10th. And that won't matter whether it's distance learning or whether we have the opportunity to return in May. The last day for students will be June 10th. I did have the opportunity today to visit Sharpsburg Elementary construction site. Things are moving along very well there. Very excited about what the new building looks like and the progress that we're making. We'll be in there in the fall. And there'll be more information about Sharpsburg coming forward here as we get closer to making the move into the new school. Also had the opportunity to visit the Vincent Grove Academic Center. That building is nearing completion, almost down to a couple final inspections coming up in the next couple of weeks. And I think the building will be turned over as they go through the final punch list. Very, very exciting for Barbara Ingram to have that new facility available to them. Another thing I'd just like to touch on is something that I've been concerned about since we've had the closure, and now it's been extended to at least May 15th, and certainly possibly could be beyond that, is any type of learning loss that we have. There's already some research predictions that there will be a substantial learning loss with this closure during the spring. That'll be compounded by the traditional summer learning loss that we generally experience for many children that aren't engaged in reading and other educational activities through the summer. So I've appointed Dr. Bishop, our deputy superintendent, to chair a task force for me, the equivalent of a COVID-19 kind of recovery plan. I've asked for her to look at it along with a lot of other staff members, kind of in 3 phases. Phase 1 would be, what can we do between now and June 10th to make the educational experience that we're providing the very best we possibly can? So we need to continue to make adjustments and changes to our distance learning plan to best meet the needs of our students. We need to look at how we can meet all of our needs of special ed, English language learners, our intervention groups, as well as our gifted and talented AP courses, all those things. How do we make those as rich and productive as possible? Also, I've asked her to look at a whole variety of nuts and bolts of things that'll have to happen through the spring, up to and including graduation and other ceremonies, the continuous repair and collection of iPads at the end of the year and Chromebooks. Just all those pieces will come together into phase 1. Phase 2, I think parents, if we're able to gather back together in the summer, or if we do it even through distance learning, we're planning for an extended summer school. It'll obviously be optional for many children. Some children will have credits that they need to make up, and they'll want to take advantage of that. But we want to make sure that we close any learning loss that we have as a result of this COVID-19 closure. So probably going to have an expanded summer school opportunity, and we really encourage you to watch for what those opportunities would be. Probably going to be extensive for our pre-K, K, grade 1 students, and probably have it at every single school in the county. And we even provide bus transportation, food services, those types of things. But this is a great opportunity to help close that learning gap, and we want to work with you to make that a reality. The third part of that plan will be when we return in the fall. Do we still have gaps? Do we still have courses in particular that we want to start the year off with a couple of weeks of recovery or review? And we'll be providing guidance with that. Our supervisors have been purposely guiding the objectives and learning outcomes of our teachers that they've been providing each week so that we know exactly where we are as we return in the fall. So a lot of information will be coming out on that. Dr. Bishop will be soliciting the help of a whole variety of people to provide feedback and input into that plan. Next, I'd like to just briefly share about Teacher of the Year. Our Teacher of the Year ceremony has been disrupted. We generally have a large banquet, a lot of celebration, and that opportunity is not going to exist for us this year, or at least in a timely manner. So we are going to continue with Teacher of the Year. We do have 5 finalists at this point. They're going to be interviewed by our judges. Our goal is by May 1 to have some type of virtual announcement of who our Teacher of the Year will be for 2020. So stay tuned with that. We're excited about what that's going to look like. It's definitely going to be a little bit different, but we're going to try to make that special, the same as we want to make graduation special if that needs to be virtual. I do want to mention that May 1st, that'll be the week before we gather again as a board, that is School Lunch Hero Day. And I just can't thank our food service staff that's working every day to prepare meals. At this point, the number that I have today is they have already prepared 110,337 meals. So that's breakfast, lunch, and a snack. They provided to all of our families. If you're 18 years old or younger, there's no economic limitation to that. Anybody 18 years or younger, even young children that aren't in school yet, can receive a meal. And we'd encourage you to come out to one of our 19 sites. They're listed on our website. But again, I want to thank our lunch heroes, these men and women that prepare these meals every day, that serve these meals every day. Actually 3 days a week, but we're providing 2 meals at a time on 2 of those days to make meals for 5 days. I've had the opportunity to stop into kitchens. I haven't made it to all the meal sites, but these people are doing a great job, a great service. We're so proud of our healthcare workers and all those folks for putting themselves out there and protecting us. I think our heroes in the form of our food service workers are equal with that. They're right out there in the public, and they're providing a great service to our community. So I guess my final comment tonight would just simply be back again to the distance learning. Again, thank you, staff. Thank you, students. Thank you, families. I just encourage you all, just every one of you, just to do your very best. That's all that anyone can expect from us at this situation. I see tremendous things happening. I'm so excited to get to join some of the Zoom sessions and see some of the work and some of the things that are turned in by the students. It's just really outstanding. Our administrators and teachers are just doing an excellent job providing some feedback. But again, I would just encourage everybody to be, just do your best, be very flexible, be patient, and give us feedback. The key person to talk to is your local principal if you can't have contact with your teacher, and make them aware of any concerns that you have. And that principal is the conduit for us to communicate with to try to make things better. And lastly, I will say if all else fails, read, and read. Read with your children, read to your children. Sit alongside yourself. You read a book, they can read their own book. That is probably one of the greatest educational tools that any of us can have during this outage. And with that, Mrs. Williams, I believe that completes my comments for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. At this time, we'll have personnel action. Dr. Bishop?
Good evening, Mrs. Williams, board members, and Dr. Michael. As we discussed earlier in closed session, there are several staff changes for your review. So at this time, I ask for your approval of today's personnel actions.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Is there a motion?
This is Peter. I move for approval of the personnel actions presented earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Mr.
Second.
Gaspard, second.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford, for your second. Any questions? Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move on to the vote. Dr. Bishop, would you call the roll for the vote, please?
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Gesford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
and Mr. Bickford.
Aye.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. We have 7 affirmative votes, so the personnel action for this evening is approved. Our next agenda item is the legislative briefing on the 2020 legislative session. Mrs. Ardith Cade, our legislative representative, and our chief legal counsel, Mr. Anthony Trotta, will be presenting.
Good evening, everyone. This is Ardith Cade, and I'm here in Anne Arundel County, far away from you, but even here, I hear good things about the Washington County school system. I was told just today that your Boonesboro students are the state representatives at the We the People competition, I think, coming up in the next few days. And I'm always very proud to be associated with the Washington County school system. We had a very strange session, as you all know, because of the virus. The session for the first time since the Civil War was shortened. And that didn't mean that they didn't plow through hundreds of bills. Many had been heard, but many were dropped from real consideration because of the shortness of the session. And but we were glad that some bills failed, because they were things like there's always a bill about the students, the IEPs, and what court costs should be paid, and the burden of proof. And so that didn't pass, and we were glad of that. It'll be back next year. There was also a bill that was moving along very swiftly that, again, lowered the standard of lead in the water from 20 parts per billion down to 5 parts per billion, which is even way below what your municipal systems are required to have. And that, I think, will be back next year also. But at the same time, we had some good bills that did get passed, and I'll talk about a few of those today. And then, of course, about the two big bills, the Built to Learn and the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. Mr. Trotter, would you like to say anything in introduction?
I have no comments at this point.
Okay. I'll go quickly over some of the bills that did pass that most of these are not particularly consequential, but they are ones that you need to know about. There was a bill, a House Bill 847 calls for a state coordinator for autism at the State Board of Education, with a lot of interest in that. Senate Bill 564 says that a county system may waive non-state graduation requirements for foster children and homeless children who have transferred into a different school system in their junior or senior year. And this apparently is enough of a problem because so many of the foster children and homeless children move from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So they are still held to the state requirements, but the secondary requirements that you may have, you are able to waive. You do not have to waive those, especially if you see that the student can fulfill the regular requirements. Now they've added a physician's assistant as well as a nurse practitioner or a physician as somebody who can do student physical exams. That seemed like a logical one. That one wasn't very controversial. They passed something about trauma-informed approaches. Now, this is one of those bills that they started out with a bill of several pages. They deleted almost everything that they had originally written and finally ended up with just a bill that says that the state board and the Department of Health are to develop guidelines for and to distribute those guidelines, but there's no enforcement. There's no, I didn't see that there's any reporting on your part. All of the really detailed stuff was amended out of the bill, of the original bill. So, and trauma-informed approach, probably you already know this definition, but it means a method for understanding and responding to an individual with symptoms of chronic interpersonal trauma or traumatic stress. And so that's what this bill is about. Again, it doesn't appear to require anything of you at this time, but again, the sponsors may come back with more detail on it next year. There's an interesting bill about school lunch payment. And the essence of that bill says that and I know you've had some very interesting things going on relative to this issue, but it says a public school shall notify a parent or legal guardian of a student when there is a low balance in the student's meal account and before the student accrues unpaid meal debt. A public school may not communicate about unpaid meal debt directly with a student or in a manner that humiliates, embarrasses, or stigmatizes the student. And you can't require the student to wear a wristband, head stamp, sticker, or other identifying marks, and you can't require them to do chores, and you can't deny them a meal, although you can give them a different meal. And that's basically it, and what it says. And then it says that you have to make sure the family knows about the school assistance program. So that's, again, it's a very specific and very kind of detailed bill, but not a very long one, and one that your staff is probably already aware of. Another bill and probably the most important of the bills besides Built to Learn and the blueprint that were passed is the one that has to do with the administration of medical cannabis at school or at school activities or on school buses. And there can be a parent or a caretaker who is a designated person, or two or three people, or two can be designated by the family, and they have the right to administer this at these events or in the school or on the school bus. But that also the school will provide a designated school personnel who's authorized to administer the medical cannabis. So they specifically, however, say that a school nurse does not need to accept this responsibility. This is the concern in all of this was the fact that under the federal law, it's still a federal offense to be dealing with cannabis, and also the school policies say that it's a drug-free school, and so therefore it gets complicated, and there are people that would not want to take the risk of being the administrator of the cannabis. So those were really the education bills, and as you know, there's usually a long list of bills and a few task forces that get established, and some things that make you have to do new reports and that cost you money and so forth. So I think you can be very grateful that those were really the education bills that were passed in addition to the two big bills. I think I talked last time about the fact that the process in both of these bills was really pretty strange. The bills were brought in, heard almost instantly with very little notice, and heard without much time thereafter for individuals or school systems or anybody to propose amendments. And they were both passed by the House very quickly and sent over to the Senate, and where the process was really not a whole lot better. And that was not really, I don't think, the finest moment of the legislative process. And there was a fair amount of criticism of how it was done. Now, the Built to Learn we had seen last year, and the bill didn't change very much. This is the bill that authorizes the Stadium Authority to issue bonds on behalf of school systems to provide the infusion of funds for needed school construction. Because they're 30-year bonds, they'd be paid back by the locals and the state over a period of time. But the state share is partly reliant on casino revenue, and we know that right now there is no casino revenue, and so whether that's a huge issue depends probably on how long those casinos are closed. We asked for two things in this bill. One was that it had allowed that small counties and smaller than 20,000 in population, and we're at about 22,000, that the small school systems could use their state funds for pre-construction costs for architects and engineering fees, so forth, which they hadn't been allowed to before. And we asked that this figure of 20,000 be increased so that we talked about 30,000, which then included Charles, Carroll, and Washington County, or even 40,000, which then got it up to Harford County as well. Well, they not only included the three of us and Harford County, they included everybody. So instead of this being something that the small counties got as sort of a benefit. They made it something that all counties could get. I have to say that on this bill particularly, Senator Edwards was our person over on the Senate side that we worked with a great deal. And he was very attentive to our requests, and so was Senator Serafini, and so were our people, so were the members of the Appropriations Committee, Delegate McKay and Delegate Quarterman. We don't seem to have many bills that go to the committees that Delegate Parrott and Delegate Weibel are on. So when I'm dealing down there, although I see them and talk to them, and their staff members too are very helpful and they're very cooperative, it's having 2 members on appropriations and 2 senators on budget and tax is really a coup. I mean, your county is getting huge representation on the really important committees by having those assignments. And those 4 people have been really very, very helpful all along as we go in. And they were very aware of our requests, and they did their best to help us along. The other thing in that bill that we tried to do, and we knew that it was a long chance, was to ask for that the allocation of the funding be changed. In this bill, Prince George's County has a whole separate methodology and pot of money. But then there are 24 jurisdictions altogether. The other big counties were all given these fat allocations, certain percentage of the whole amount of the $2.2 billion that the bonding authority was authorized for. And the 17 smaller counties, including us, which represent 25% of the school population statewide, are only allocated 11.3% of the money. Well, this is like not fair, and it's inequitable, and we made a fair amount of noise about it. We got a fair amount of attention about it, but they didn't change the allocations. And why not? Oh, well, they came up with all kinds of things. Well, the large counties had shovel-ready projects, and they could make immediate use of the funds, or the small counties wouldn't be able to come up with the local match. And maybe that's right in some cases, and it's probably wrong in some cases. So the bill passed with a very inequitable kind of formula for the money, and whether there's anybody who is going to make a big protest about that, I don't know. So that bill is contingent. It has to, the blueprint bill has to be signed in order for the this bill to be valid. And that's the kind of thing that they put in, so they're protecting the blueprint as maybe more important than even this bill, or at least not have this bill pass and the blueprint not pass, and so forth. So there's all kinds of things that can be done in legislation. That's a little bit unusual to have that kind of contingency put in, but it's in on that one. I was sort of gasping because an eagle just flew by the trees out in front of my house, which is always impressive. So is that, I'll go on. Mr. Trotter, do you want to say anything before I get into the blueprint?
No, I think just if you could cover the blueprint, I think that would be a good idea.
Okay, I will talk about the blueprint, but whoops, excuse me, just a second. The blueprint bill is 235 pages long. So, and it's pretty dense language. And and I know many of your staff people have been spending many hours trying to untangle all of the things that it says you will and you won't get, must do, to get, and ways you will be monitored and so forth. The bill has a lot of different components. There's a huge accountability section, and it's strong and it's complicated, and it doesn't really treat school systems and the state board as if they're very competent, and that seems a little unfair. But hopefully the system will work out, and it will not be a real burden. But it's a very strong accountability, and it will take a lot of doing to be responsive to the accountability requirements. There are really good opportunities in the bill for the high poverty schools and to strengthen their community support and make them community schools. And there are good funds for learners who are falling behind. There's a strong emphasis on career and college readiness by the end of the 10th grade, and a new emphasis on career training to help non-college bound students be job ready when they graduate from high school. And I think you are one of the counties that are really already pretty far ahead in a lot of that. There's a very complicated teacher career ladder and teacher training and this is and that's, and pages and pages and pages it goes on. And then the area that we looked at because there was an issue, it's trying to reach all 3- and 4-year-olds with pre-K learning, quality learning opportunities. And what did we ask for? Well, right now, Washington County in particular, and some other counties like Garrett and maybe some on the shore, possibly Allegheny, are already providing full-day pre-K for many of your children. And I think you are probably at the forefront in really offering it to all children. And you're ahead of a lot of the other counties. And so the bill requires that starting in 2023, they moved the date from 22 to 23, there would be a payment from the state and local governments for the pre-K for all Tier 1 children. Tier 1 children are those whose family income is less than 300% of poverty. And I guess that is about, somebody said, I think about $85,000 for a family of 4. I don't have those figures. And then the Tier 2 children are for whom the state would not start paying until 25, I think it is, maybe 26, are the children whose family income is between 300 and 600% of poverty. And in that case, the state board and will be coming up with a sliding scale. So if you're just over 300%, you really wouldn't have to pay much. But if you're almost at 600%, you'd have to pay almost all, and it's like $10,000 in that year, going on up to about $19,000 in future years. Tier 3 children, this bill says they won't get paid for at all. So, and in the bill, there also is a big emphasis on trying to have a lot of the kindergarten or of the pre-K kids in private, nonprofit education situations, but non-public education. Partly because there's already a good bit of that around. There are a lot of church-related schools that have been around and so forth. And the state doesn't want to have to build all these schoolrooms for all these 4-year-olds and eventually 3-year-olds. So they're pushing in this bill. You're trying to have up to half of your pre-K going to non-public, if that's available in your county. But for us to start having to charge the parents of, getting all the income information and then having to charge the parents starting in a couple of years is very clumsy. So what we asked for was for the state to pay for, in situations like ours where where we already are providing that they would pick up the payment now instead of, for schools that are already doing this, that they would pick up the coverage for those children on the basis of what we were doing this year. Well, they didn't quite do that, but they did, what they did put in was a county board may provide up to 100% of the family share on behalf of the family. In other words, if you want to continue to absorb what the state won't cover out of your own funds, that you're going to be allowed to do that. You're not going to have to go and try and charge the tier 2 and tier 3 parents. That's not going to be that easy, and it's probably going to be fairly expensive, but it was what they would finally give us. And if they hadn't given us that, then it was going to be like a mandatory thing that you have the tier 2 parents paying part of the cost. So, so that's what was in the bill kind of along the way. And then suddenly, right near the end, several things happened. And Senator Serafini was definitely part of the working on these, at least 2 of these 3. First of all, they came in with a whole big major program having to do with coordinated community support partnerships. And this all has to do with mental health, so to speak. And where's that? Oh, the part of that, there would be a structure, a superstructure, and then there would also be, this would be kind of a multi-agency thing, not just a school situation. So it's really bringing in all of the arms of the community that can help with mental health, knowing that is, and behavioral health is really what they're talking about. And part of what they're to do is the development and implement of a grant program to meet the holistic behavioral health needs and other related challenges facing the students proposed to be served by the Coordinated Community Supports Partnership, and that sets reasonable administrative costs for the Coordinated Community Supports Partnership. They will develop best practices for the implementation of and related to the creation of a positive classroom environment for all students using evidence-based methods that recognize the disproportionality of classroom management referrals, and then they go on and on. So that's in the bill. It gets, I think it's I forget if it's 250 million the first year. It's a big price tag, but it's something. No, it can't be 250 million. I'm not sure. But there's big price tags for what they expect and want to do, and it goes up each year by it doubles the second year, and then adds another same amount as the first year to it, the third year and fourth year. So that got put in the bill, and that was a bipartisan thing. But I think that has been a lot of concern about classroom behavioral health, and that's their way of trying to get at that issue. And so that was the first thing that suddenly appeared. And then the second thing that appeared was something that, again, was, in this case, very valuable. It said that if the economy goes crazy, which we know it is, and goes down by 7.5% or more, that there are protections in this bill that would lower the payments to the inflation level, and that so that there is that economic protection from having the blueprint take all of the state funds that are available for everything if the economy goes way down. And then the third thing was something that, again, I know Senator Serafini was very involved in, and that is putting in, after a few years of the blueprint, putting in a time when there is an evaluation to see whether it is accomplishing what it's supposed to accomplish. And they will do a report that the blueprint for Maryland's future is being implemented as intended. So it's being implemented and it's achieving expected outcomes. And then they're also looking at the funding at that point. And then if it doesn't meet those standards, again, it would go back, the payments would go back to an inflation level increase rather than the increases that are currently in the bill. So there's a lot of protection economically now in the 235-page bill. So now the question, and the final question, is, well, is the governor going to sign the bill? The governor has a right to sign a bill. He has a right to veto a bill, and he has a right to do neither, and in which case the bill becomes law. And I think we've all heard the governor say that he doesn't plan to sign anything that has has much money involved. Well, we know this bill has lots of money involved. We don't know whether he's saying in this case that he won't sign it and let it be law, or whether he is going to veto it. So that's the question of the week. There's speculation in every direction. There are pros and cons of signing it, and it goes into law, and it still has the economic protections in it. If he vetoes it, the legislature can either meet in a special session sometime between now and, preferably before the beginning of the fiscal year, or they could meet some other time, or they could wait until next January to override the veto. The governor, if he signs it, he has the powers in the budget to put in what we call the BRFA, which is like it's laws that change the laws requiring certain payments be made. So he could put in a bill and he could do his budget according to not having all of those payments be required. Now the legislature would have to agree to that, but they can't add to the budget. So they would have to either find money other places, or they would have to convince him of a supplemental budget someplace. So those are the real questions. And the Green Street people, the legislative staff from the various counties, we're still meeting every Friday on Zoom and trying to figure out what's going on. And the legislative committee is meeting, I think, on the 27th of this month of May. And I'm attending online the weekly meeting that the legislative COVID-19 committee has, a speaker and the president, and they have various state agencies talking with them. So you get a lot of information that way. So there's still a lot going on. It's not like things are really quiet, but the hush of the moment is what is the governor going to do with the bills that are sitting in front of him. So I just want to say, again, Mr. Trotta, do you want to say anything yet?
I just wanted to caution the superintendent and the board with regard to the blueprint. The blueprint is going to impose some significant new mandates for local boards of education across the state of Maryland. And unfortunately, they have not provided sufficient funding to carry out those new mandates. So I'm very concerned about being able to complete the requirements under that new law. With regard to the Build to Learn Act that Mrs. Cade referenced, which is going to provide $2.2 billion more for school construction. Unfortunately, the seven largest counties get most all of the money. And the way this bill is structured, it really violates every principle of equity and fairness. These are my comments.
Okay. Do you have any questions? I just really want to say thank you to all of you for letting me represent you, and particularly to the quick response team. You've been very helpful, and Mr. Stauffer's always at the legislative committee meetings in Annapolis. The legislators from Washington County have been very cooperative and helpful, and their staff people are always willing when I'm supposed to be doing something technological, like using a thumb drive and getting bills downloaded and so forth. They're very helpful as well, both substantively and in terms of just that sort of thing. And particularly, I want to thank Mr. Trotta and Mrs. Brown. They are both ever ready, and I am in touch with them most days during the session, and get good advice and tell them what I'm doing, and very seldom do they tell me not to do it. So I think we've had a wonderful working relationship, and I'm sorry Mr. Trotta is retiring. So again, thank you. And do you have any questions or comments?
Colleagues, do you have any questions for Mrs. Cade or for Mr. Trotta?
Just to thank you, Mrs. Cade. Thank you very much for all of your work. This is Linda Murray.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Mrs. Cade, thank you so much for yet again another legislative session where you represented us so very well. And a big thank you to Mr. Trotta and to Ms. Brown for their work with the legislative response team. They do such an excellent job keeping us updated, keeping us apprised of what's happening in Annapolis. So thank you so much.
Artist, thank you. Hope to see you in person next year, when the
Well,
legislative time
you know,
begins.
Well, it's been a very interesting a time for all of us now, and I guess we're all learning to. Somebody was talking about reimagining education. Well, I think we certainly are reimagining education out of necessity, and maybe we're getting a lot of good things out of it. We are all committed to making things work, and I think people are quite impressed with how well things are working. So, yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's usually at this point that I tell you to have a safe trip home, but right now I'm just going to tell you to stay safe, stay well.
I've
and
been
hope to
doing
see you
exactly
soon.
that.
All right.
Thank you so much to all of you. And you all stay safe and stay well.
Thank you. Next on our agenda, we usually at this time have board member committee reports, but the committees have not met since our last meeting on April 7th. So there are no committee reports to give this evening. We'll move on then to miscellaneous. Yes.
Mrs. Williams, I do want to report that the facilities committee will be meeting next Wednesday morning at 9:30 via some type of video conference.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Is there anyone else that wants to announce a meeting?
Yes, Mrs. Williams, this is Wayne Ridenhour. There will be no HR meeting next week.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to miscellaneous. We have one item, which as usual is the first agenda, or I'm sorry, future agenda items. There's one future agenda item on our list. That's upcoming May 5th meeting, the 2020 through 2029 enrollment forecast. If you have anything that you would like to see placed on an agenda, please let a member of the Agenda Planning Committee know, and we'll take care of getting that on an agenda for us. Thank you. We'll move then to board member comments. Mr. Bickford, would you like to begin?
Certainly, just continuing to think about all the teachers, students, and the amazing response from the community, the supportive comments that we've been receiving. I've been especially inspired by the emails and the other examples that Dr. Michael has been sending us of just the creative, ingenious ways that our teachers and our media specialists and all the different support personnel are continuing to keep our children learning. So hopefully we'll get through this soon. And thank you to the staff for making it possible for us to have these meetings from the safety of our home.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Mrs. Fisher.
Yes, I've been totally amazed time after time with the creative endeavors of our teachers, our principals, and others in developing and presenting lessons, updates, greetings, readings, special programming, you name it, and they've come up with some format for it that they have delivered to our students. And no huge new undertaking such as this distance learning effort is without some hiccups. But I have heard far more praise from parents than complaints. And I want to thank all the staff, the parents, the students, from the bottom of my heart. All of you be well, and together we will get through this.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Murray?
Yes, I echo the same sentiments. I'd just like to thank all WCPS staff, parents, and students for doing all they can for adapting to distance learning during this pandemic. I know it hasn't been easy, but they're all doing such a great job. And I also want everyone to please stay safe and keep well.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Mr. Gaspard.
I really can't add any more to what our colleagues have said, but thank you for saying that. And I wish for everyone to be safe over the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaspard. Mr. Ridenhour.
Nothing at this time, Mrs. Williams. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Mr. Stauffer.
I'd just like to echo what Mrs. Fisher and Mr. Bickford, Mrs. Murray have said. I'm sure if we all had our druthers that we'd rather not be in this situation, but we got to make the best of a bad situation, and I think we're doing that. It's hopefully it'll be over soon and we can return to some state of normality.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Mr. Mackley.
Yes, I'd just like to pretty much echo what everybody else has said. Thank you to all the teachers, all the staff that have helped us kind of get through this so far. And I especially want to say thank you to those that will be a part of the decision and the plans for what will be going on with our senior ceremonies this year. I trust that whatever decisions will be made going forward will allow the seniors to have a really special celebration of their graduation.
Thank you, Mr. Mackley. If there are no further comments, Dr. Michael?
I don't have anything further. Mr. Mackley will certainly work hard on trying to make everything special as we can this spring. It's going to be definitely a different year. Let's see, we got a couple emails to come in on the BOE account tonight, and I'll try to answer some of those this evening.
Arcade
is now exiting.
One idea was something about T-shirts. I talked actually about fifth graders graduating, but Chris almost kind of thought about, you guys come up with a creative T-shirt maybe we could have for seniors that survived COVID-19 for the graduating class of 2020. I might be able to entertain a way to create those for all the seniors. I don't know. That would be not much, but it would be one little thing maybe you guys could think about as a student government group or something. Maybe we could find a way to fund that or something. So we'd be interested in any ideas. Like I say, Dr. Akers is our key person working with all the high school principals on graduation. Let's hold our breath. It could still be something in person, but I really see it's something online. And I think the sooner we get working on that, the better. But we will continue to hold out hope for the best. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. And my colleagues have said it also very well, but I would just like to thank our superintendent, his staff, administrators, teachers, students, all our educational support personnel, our parents for doing all they can to make the most of the bad situation. So thank you. And if there are no further comments, we'll adjourn tonight's meeting.